Okay, so normally I do the attendance for the week on the Friday after things are due, but I've decided for tonight, and I'm doing this the night before this is due. Okay, and only because I've had some conversation and I think it's worthy to talk about my output and how it works to help you get through this exercise and to really show you another way of using the dev tools. So I will do this video. I'm going to post it out to Discord. So hopefully many of you, I think most of you are on Discord, so you'll see this, but this will be your week 9 attendance. I do want to tell you that I did add to the Dev 1 that's coming up in week 12 that you're going to need to walk me through your code in DevTools. So that is part of it. I'd been saying it, but that is a part of it. So in my link here, I am going to show you via DevTools what makes this work. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and open up DevTools here. And by default, DevTools is going to come into the HTML. And now in my case, I used, instead of divs everywhere, I use main as kind of the wrapper. And that's the way I talked about it, is the wrapper. Now, I'm not going to go over the CSS because we could talk about that. And if you don't have any CSS, ask me and I'll give you some good references. But just a basic YouTube search is a fine way to start. But in this case, here is a form. So I have a form and I gave it an ID. And I have an H1, I have an element, I have an input. Now in this case, I was actually talking to Brian about this last night. He came into office hours. Good job, Brian. And I realized I had given this a name, but I actually didn't use it. So I need to remove it. And what this is referring to is this input field. And I'll show you why I don't need it in a minute. And then required in this case, and this is what I was saying last attendance about, at the bare minimum, you want to have some kind of message to the user if they don't give the proper input. Now, there's various ways to do it. I gave you a video for one way to do it, but at a bare minimum, just putting required, wrapping it in a form, will do the following. When you try to submit something, if there's nothing there, it'll say, hey, that has to be filled out because this attribute is on there. Okay. And so, so this again is your input. Your label is just the label beside it, and it's a good way to do it. And then the button is, of course, the submit button. So what I'm going to do now, and this is just now, this is not using DevTools to go over the code. It's just showing you the code. So now I'm going to go over to my sources, and I'm going to click on my app.js file. So there's a couple things here. I set up a couple of consts that links to parts of the page that I want to do something with, and via get element ID, which we've seen before, and I believe he's briefly talked about so far. So I have this for the B form, which build it form, and the output, which we've used before. Right. And again, if you want to go back and look, you can see that here is those IDs. So that in my code, the first thing I do is set up a constant that points to those areas. And then I have the standard display on page. Now, the only difference is here, I've actually just passed it. And I've already seen a couple of people who actually gave the user the ability to input the text they wanted to repeat, which is a good functionality, because you do need to add some functionality here. So in this case, we've seen this before. What I really want to focus on is this part right here. Okay. So this is the form, B form, right, that I set up here. Add an event listener. So an event listener is part of the browser that's going to listen for something. Okay. And so, by the way, just because it'd be good to know, I could just right now type in the console the B form because it's pointing to the form, and I could just look at that and to see, right, what's in there. That is one way to at least browse what, is where my content is looking. I could do the same thing as far as output, and I could see that as well. Okay. So, but in this case, I set an event listener. and I listen for a submit. So this button is going to represent when you hit submit. And then what happens is this code right here in this block, right? Basically it says when you click on the submit button, run this code. Now, actually, there is something that happens before that, and it's what I referenced before. Because these are required, the browser on its own, without any code from me, will actually tell the user, oh, hey, you can't do that. You have to fill out that field. Okay. And again, that's bare minimum user validation. So in this case, right, when I actually hit submit, there's an event that I can then pull content out of, right? And I'll show you this. And this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to put, and there's a reason why I'm putting a breakpoint right here inside. Because, and if I just refresh, I'm going to refresh. Notice that the page didn't stop because I'm inside of the event listener. And because I'm inside, all that the page did with the HTML loaded is it just set up the event listener, and now it's waiting. And as soon as I hit submit, given that I give it data and that it doesn't get caught in the required mode, then it's going to run my code. Okay. So let me just show you a couple of things now related to that. First, I'm going to put a number here, right? I'm going to hit tab and I'm going to put a number. I'm going to put like a P tag here, right? So the number I want, how many of them do I want, the element that I want. And then when I click here, my code will stop. Okay. Now what's great here is that because I'm capturing, or I'm referring to the event that happened, that submit, I can actually see down here, I can type E and I can see all this content related to all these things. We're not going to cover very many of them in this class just because there's so much, but we have a couple that are really important to us. Okay. But the first thing we do, okay, now the next thing is not related to this E. It's just telling the browser that says, hey, normally when the HTML finds a submit button, it actually assumes there's something that's going to happen on the server. But because we're going to handle this, we actually have to change the default behavior to say, no, prevent that. Don't do that. Let me handle it. And so my next line, and I can just show you this, right? So now again, nothing really happens, but I'll tell you, if you don't do that, you definitely see what will happen, because your page will try to do something and it'll go to a white page. And if you look up at the address bar, you will see that it's actually trying to do something, and that something you can know is out on the server. So now the next line is something that I do, because if the user clicks this again after the first time, I want to clear the output that was created from the first time, because remember, this code, this event listener, can be run many times. So I'm actually doing a little pre-work here, even though the first time I don't need this. So it's output, it's that div, right? It's where my output's going to be. And what it says is to enter HTML, clear it. And you'll see why on the second run, but on the first one, you might not make sense. So now here, I'm setting up a constant and I'm saying number of, and I've just defined it. Now I haven't run this line, but there's something called parse int here. But before we get there, let's actually look at what e.target.elements is. So it's like an array. It's called an array-like object. And there's two inputs and a button that represent two inputs and a button. So the E, the event, the target of that event, which is on the form. So it's actually referencing the items inside of the form, right? And in this case, because this is an array like value, I can do this and I can just say, which one do I want to look at? And that will show me the first one, which is my number. And by doing dot value, it'll tell me the value of that. But notice what this is. This is a string. Because I am going to use this in a for loop in a minute, I'm going to convert it to an int. So what it does, it says go out there and grab that, but then convert it to an int. So let me show you by stepping into that. Now you notice num of is 3. And now because I've run that, I can actually just type num of, and it'll show me that that is 3, the integer 3, and not the string 3. So now on the HTML, so now it's got that value, it's parsed it. So now I'm going to do the next line, which is going to look at this value. Again, the very same, but in this case, we're looking at 1 because it was the next. If you remember up here when I showed you this, 2 inputs and a button, right, is what is e.target.elements. So I want to get that one. And that's why it's 1, because index arrays are in 0 index. So the first one is 0, the second one is 1. The third one, which would be here, which we're not really needing because it's really just providing the submitting the event or creating the event. So now what I'm going to do here is I'm actually just going to set up a simple for loop. There's other ways I could have done this, but I could have done a for each. I mean, it's not an array, but I could have made it that way. There's other ways I could have done it, but all I'm going to do here, right, is I'm going to set it up. I'm going to run it 3 times because of the input over there. Right? And then I'm going to pass, and this is what I've done is I have invoked the display on page. It's passed it the element I want to build, and now it's going to do that create element. And again, we're going to learn more of this as we move more into the course, right? But we can kind of consider it, I don't consider it a black box anymore, but I consider it something that you should have now learned parts of. So now we're going to append that output with whatever the element, because we've updated the text content on there. And then we come back here. So we give the first one, you see it down here. And by the way, if you actually inspected there, you would see that it created that P tag. Okay. So again, I can just run through, and because I only have 3 of them, that's the second one. And there we go, the third one. Okay. So now that I've done that, I'm done with it. I'm like, yeah, I've gotten through it. So now it comes down to this line. So the reason I do this is so that I can say target elements. Again, that now in this case, it's the same idea as up here. And the value I'm going to set to blank. And why am I doing that? Or in this case, empty string, is so that it clears these values, right? And you can watch this happen. Again, this is the benefit of using the dev tools. You can see the 3 went away, and then the P went away, and then it's like, it's done. It's pretty much done. But what I'm trying to show you is first what my code's doing. So it should make it easy for you to do the first part of this assignment, but more than anything, I want to teach you the importance of using the dev tools because they can be so helpful to help you understand your code once you're trying to write it and troubleshoot it, right? So again, right, at this point, I could be done, right? And could drop out and it'll drop into something else, but I could come over here and just hit run again, right? Put in 2, and this, let's put in H1. And this time, because there is something in that output, when I hit build it, right? Oh, I have to actually step through my code. Then that clears it right there. Okay. So I don't know if you find this helpful. Again, I'm going to put it out on Discord so you see it. But what you need to do is add some functionality, play with the style. You can do a simple style and then provide the Git hack link and then write about this work. And again, in the video, I talked about some of this, but I didn't go over and show you in detail. And Jason did a nice job at this point. He has a good output. We already had a discussion. Rob did a really nice job as well, and so did Jonathan. So you have a couple other student examples to go through. I hope this helped you and helps you understand what you need to learn, why DevTools is important and why you want to learn it, not only for Dev 1, but just so you can be better at coding. Have a good one. Bye.